Professor Arisaka, thank you for coming. Yeah, you have the floor. So.
Okay. Again, thank you so much for Steve and Fernando for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here in Kyoto. Yeah. Should I use a mic or is that okay? That's okay? Yeah, okay. I'll try to talk loud. What I am going to present, I think it follows very well from John's talk. The philosophical structures are sort of the same. It's just that I'm going to talk about Miki's philosophical anthropology, his book, and that concretizes what he says in terms of everydayness, his notion of everydayness. But just the basics of dates for Miki, just so that we have it here. He was born in 1897. That is, say, in a Meiji time where the modernization of Japan was rapidly underway. So he was growing up in a time where this tension between Western knowledge and technology was really transforming Japan. So it was in the environment, right? How technology at that time for Japan was a lot of things were new and a lot of ways of doing were new. So he was confronted with new ways of imagining the world, so to speak, right? So that's the time he grew up, so to speak, and became a philosopher, right? So a lot of his reflections were very much salient to this time period. 1917 to 1927, he experienced Kyoto University to Heidelberg, Marburg, Paris. He studied with Heidegger in his very early time. That's even before being in time, right? So he was, Heidegger was at that time concerned with people like Aristotle and then Husserl, and I mean, so it was that period where he was under Heidegger. And Poincaré was, of course, philosophy of science. He had a background, so things like the exchange between science and philosophy and to some extent technology, that was very much in his environment. He just got arrested for being under suspicion and collaboration with communism. He had this communist sentiment. It wasn't like he did something bad. It was like one of those times. Showa Kenkyukai, 1937 to 1940. That was under the imperial government. It was sort of like the think tank in thinking through what can Japan contribute to fighting Western imperialism agenda. So for him, that meant, okay, what is Japan at the time like? And in his mind was very much, well, Japan was one of the first countries in the world that succeeded in modernizing and using Western knowledge and means, and such as technology, but remaining Japan. So it was in his imagination, well, maybe Japan can actually do something in terms of creating a westernized, not westernized form of a modern culture. Yeah, so modern yet not Western, completely Western. Because Japan obviously was not the West, but it was the first example of adopting or sort of negotiating with the Western technologies in a way that was, he probably thought was original. He died, as John said, 1945 in September, in a prison, unfortunately. And it is true that he didn't get to reflect on the direction that it took after the war. That would have been actually interesting. Yeah, I love this picture of Miki, and that's also. Yeah. Some publications, let's see, I don't have to go through this, but because you can also look it up. Notable dates, historical, the history of philosophy, 1932. 1938 was a philosophy of technology book. And 1939 was the imagination, the logic of imagination book. So it was also around the time Japan was expanding into the world. And the mood was hopeful at the time. John mentioned that it was maybe perhaps too optimistic, but it was sort of an optimistic time for Japan. And 1948 was the second book on Miki, as it was sort of a posthumous. But yeah, so after that was the time he, in his Tetsugaku Noto, yeah, he had lots of various reflections. So, yeah. So those are sort of basically the dates. I'm going to call this basic philosophical orientation and experiential ontology. That's just a name that I use. And it's like a summary of what John said, so it's not new. Human life or human beings, we cannot be grasped as an object. We are sort of what in Nishida's term, well, actually, Miki's term, yeah, mediality is a Miki's term. We are sort of a mediating being that is the human existence. And it's this dialectical existential development of the mediation between the subjective and the objective. And objective, he means not 객관적이 objective, but it's a material condition. So shutai, the subject is not a shukan, but shutai. It's not a consciousness, but it's a real material subject in the world, interacting with the historical world. The things are not just out there, but it is a result of our dealings with and creation. Why do we have chairs? Well, because we need to sit. We can't stand the whole time. And these things come up in our world all the time. I mean, I just used the everyday object as an example. So these poiesis and praxis, mythos and logos, and subjective and objective that John went through in his theoretical makings. But for the notion of experiential ontology, experience is not something that's in the self, but experience is a robustly concrete dealings with the environment. Environment is also somehow, it's not such an environment, but it's our world, let's just say, world in this concrete sense. That's the world. And that has sociality embedded in it. And it's embodied in the sense of the selves are not just bodies, right? We are active, engaged, changing, and being changed kind of entities in this robust sense of the world. And that's how Miki uses the term everydayness, situatedness, mediality, historicality, rekshise, chukan, say, and then nichijou-sei and situatedness. Well, it'll come up. What was that? Yeah. So it is a sort of, in terms of spatiality and temporality, gains a historical material form. And they are together in this situatedness. And that's where this creativity and imagination occur, or happen, rather. And technology, too, is not understood, not simply manipulation or means to an end, but it's a active and robust dealings with our environment that changes us and that we thereby change our world. It's very Nishida. Okay, lack of political consciousness that we can talk about later, but that's for Nishida and Miki both, I think. That there is this, I mean, they like this sort of ontological discussions and material development as if it's going to just have this back and forth and will be okay. But maybe it was not okay. I would like to then actually get into the text, but is that okay so far? The notion of not everydayness and so on. Maybe I will read the English. Can't read the English because it's a thing that's hiding. Human beings are not simply to be understood objectively. They should be grasped subjectively. Herein is the fundamental difference between anthropology on the one hand and other sciences, such as physiology and psychology. Such sciences entail an objective cognition about human beings, but anthropology, in contrast, offers an understanding of the human from the perspective of the self as subject. Now, today, when we say anthropology, we think of a subject where the human beings are divided in cultures or there's the cultural anthropology, physical anthropology. That's not what it means by this term. So his thinking is against understanding the human in terms of biology, physiology, psychology. See, these are sort of objective sciences through which the notion of the human is explained. But what he calls anthropology, his term is that, okay, it is this existential sense. So it's more like, I don't know, sort of existential selves. So the subject is also, as you see in the Japanese, 人間は単に客観的に捉えられるものではなくね、客観的です。objective, but it's not 客観的じゃない。客体的。So it's from the beginning, this is material. Anthropology は人間の主体的な把握である。So it's the 主体 subject as body, subjective as a real material subject. So these are all quotes from his anthropology. To say that a human being is mediality is to understand ourselves not as a discovery of some philosophy, but rather as belonging to fundamental experience. Various philosophies are simply theoretical interpretations of its modes. Thus, if such mediality belongs to the fundamental nature of the human, it cannot be classified through the categories and attributes and such. Medialities, not simply a middle of an addition or a mixture, but if mediality is that which qualitatively permeates the whole, then it internally contains contradictions in itself. It can only be understood through a dialectic. Human existence is full of contradictions. Anthropology is a philosophical articulation of the mediality's fundamental existential self-realization and its development. 人間が中間者であるということは、何かの哲学の発見であるよりも、我々の現実の生活における基礎経験に属し、種々の哲学はこの基礎経験の種々の仕 方における理論的解釈に過ぎないと言えるであろう。Okay. So, ideality. This idea that the human existence, historical human existence, contains this dialectic and its internal contradictions of both the subject and object, and so on. That is, well, it's unclear whether he got that from Nishida or through his Nishida, through Miki, Nishida developed this idea. It's sort of like around the time that he was developing this idea was also the time that Nishida developed this idea, sort of the middle period of Nishida, so 30. It's probably since Nishida was the teacher, you probably get that from one gets that from professor, but it's both. But anyway, late Miki developed this in this direction of using technology, and that's not so pronounced. Though the philosophical foundations are very similar. So what he calls anthropology is this 人間学は人間の根源的な存在、自覚存在性に基づき、その発展であり、その哲学的表現である。I love this chat. I don't know if you've been reading this, but it says Miki for Miki, or the Miki for Miki. It doesn't have this. I don't want to say Miki. See what it does. Miki. Weekly. Okay. It's a good example of our need to have this kind of mode of mediation. It's not that perfect yet. It's good. So that means our actions are expressive. Actions are not simply praxis, but also significant as poiesis. This means that actions do not remain internal to themselves, but rather essentially aimed outwards. See, the things are objects of action, right? They are not objects of contemplation, and we don't think about it. It's like the Heidegger's sort of readiness to hunt idea, if you know Heidegger. It's like we do things, and that's how we organize our environment. And by using it, or the need to use it, they come into form. So it's not even a conceptual mediation, but it's just simply the physical ways of doing it. And that is in environmental design, that is in the forms of an object. I live in Germany. The standards of height is for me very difficult. The toilets are set so that my feet will always dangle. It's just too high. And then the standard height of kitchen counter is 92 centimeters in Germany. For me, it's like way too high. I can't cook. I cook a lot. So in my house, I said I need my kitchen counters to be low so I can cook normally. So it's like 20 centimeters lower. And then the German people come and say, whoa, why is this kitchen so low? Like the mission house. And I noticed the other thing. I come back to Japan. It's like in public bathrooms, the sinks are low. Right? So it's like, oh, finally it's low. I don't have to wash my hand like this, you know? So these kinds of things, what becomes a standard, yeah, that has to do with the height of maybe a general population that is reflected. I mean, there's like thousands of examples of this, right? Our environment is a result of, these kinds of a human interaction. Actions, qua expression are dialectical. So by now we know this idea. With actions, we are born and then die. And by dying, we are born. That's like straight out of Nishida, but it's okay. All right, so that, but anyway, this idea, the expressiveness of our concrete actions, that has an impact on the way in which we further design our environment. And that's also an I-thou relation. It's not just I and the thou, but they are founded on a third, a foundation that is the society. It is through the society that I and thou become what they are. In this fundamental sense, our actions are also fundamentally social. So we say that anthropology is a self-realization of the human, but this doesn't mean a self-realization of an individual, but rather it is a self-realization of the society itself. So society for us, as the foundation of existence, is transcendental. Transcendental in this sense, it's both in the sense of um, the condition through which we are or become what we are, and through all actions become possible, the material conditions through which, but also transcendental in the sense of that we transcend ourselves through this. Well, environment becomes something else. Think of how internet completely changed the way we deal with things, right? In communication and everything else. It has that kind of a fundamental going beyond quality. It is also the condition under which we condition for the possibility of. So it is I am thou in the sense of this the dialectic, but it's just not it's not an individual I am thou, but it's the collective or the society or the communicative I am thou. Oh, it's good. So that's what he means by society, sociality. It's not just the gathering of individual entities. It's not that idea, but rather it's the being in the world, but it's a mitzvah, it's collective. I don't know. I mean, it's easy to use Heideggerian references, but not because he's a Heideggerian, but other way around. All these Heideggerian ideas came later, so you could say that a lot of the Heidegger's ideas were already that Miki anticipated all these terms. Our standpoint in anthropology is that of the self-realizing actions. Human beings are not abstracted from the body and grasped socially as subject of actions. But to say subject of actions, it must contain an objective moment in the dialectic. Human beings are internal as well as external, subjective as well as objective. Human beings are grasped in their fullness for the first time through their self-realizing actions. Also, by now, this idea is explained through John's summaries of the theoretical summaries, but here he says also through his text, basically the same thing. It is the steitig selves and that is embodied and active and engaged and historical and social in the world. And that is the totality or the totality of the human. More on embodiment and situationality. So Jotai says. Embodiment, that is body in their bodiness, is the realm of the body as subject that cannot be objectified. It's the active self. It's not objectifiable, just like the eye that sees it. Eyes cannot see itself. I mean, that's also in Nishida, this non-objectifiability of our actions. Because the moment we reflect and make an object of ourselves, then it becomes a body in the world as seen, but it's acting body in the sense of this active intuition in Nishida's sense. It is an involvement that immediately make up our world, and that is not graspable as an object of analysis. You could make an object of analysis and talk about it as theoretical entities, but the original thing that is interesting is the act itself, right? That makes the world. So I think in both Nishida and Miki, and actually all of the Kyoto school thinkers, this level difference, one has to be, you have to read it so that you are clear on, is he talking about the described? Is he talking about the theoretical explained? Or is he talking about, is he referring to the act itself? Yeah? Because they do both. Yeah? And they are sort of, it has a different status in theorizing. So that sometimes he's talking about the what that which is not describable, but you have to describe it because you have to write about it. Right? But writing about it, you don't want to be confused. Okay, it's the some kind of embodied self in the world. What is that? And then you kind of objectify it, right? But it's not that. It's the act. Then the embodiment and situationality cannot be separated. True. Through the embodiment, the human beings are situated because we are always somewhere. Right? We are situated. There is no self that is not situated except in theory. So he's talking about the self that is this non-objectifiable action part, and that is complete, and is in the world in some very tangible, real sense, in particular space and time. It's the now, actually. So it's the initiative, so eternal now that is completely concrete. That is also in this kind of a theory. Also, walking, sitting, lying down, we have bodies through all these possibilities themselves, not through the determinations of an objective knowledge. Bodies are not objects. They are rather these possibilities. If we are to call the totality of the tool-like organs as the body, then the body as possibilities might be called embodiment. Embodiment of human existence gives the parameter to the body. And bodies express the embodiment of human existence. So it's this, the embodiment as expressive, embodiment as doing things, embodiment as involved. And by embodiment, he means really things like going places, sitting down and lying down, drinking and eating and everything that the sort of things that we do in communicating. I mean, it's famous, like how people stand very close or very distant in different cultural contexts, and all these things are expressions of a social embodied actions that has a manifestation. And how people define sociality and too. Yeah. Okay. So that is his embodiment. I just took the opportunity for this workshop form to read text. Hope it's okay. It's not okay. Human beings act by mediating the world. These actions create the human being in the sense that there are no actions without mediation in the world. Human beings are born in the world. Human beings are not just subjective or conceptual. They act toward the world and change it, thereby being born anew in the world. Maybe like I'm beginning to repeat myself, but here the point is that it's not our creation. I mean, it is a creation, but it's not our individual creation. We're already enthroned, and we are born and raised in this world that is made up, and through that we make a new world out of it. In the 90s, Um, well, let's just say I'm born in Japan. 1980, I went to the States, and 2005, I moved to Germany. And in the 90s, I moved to the Bay Area, the San Francisco, the Silicon Valley Bay Area. And there, for instance, it was a very exciting time. The internet came up, and the search engines were being developed. The Netscape, remember Netscape? But anyway, Netscape and Yahoo. It was before Google. And then seeing what Netscape could do, the Google, which was forming at the time, um, from the Netscape failures, the Google learned. And then from Yahoo and Google, Netscape that were beginning, the Google said, okay, we can do so much better. And Google completely took over. So the Netscape just went out of business. So, and then also at the time, interesting work, they were debating whether computers will become smaller. And yes, it did. They became a laptop. Yeah. And from the laptop, they thought, hey, can it be so small that you can actually carry it around like a phone, right? At the time, Nokia already made a breakthrough through mobile devices. And then Apple thought that, it's not that the computers are going to be small, it's that the phones are going to be a computer. And there was a BlackBerry and iPhone. That was the development of both. Guess who won, right? I mean, who uses a BlackBerry nowadays, right? So it was because it was just too small to type. And then Nokia thought that, well, they just sort of decided, okay, that's not so necessary to go on the internet. Well, they lost. Right? So it's like all these things were happening in the 90s without, I mean, now we just think of the smartphones as obvious, but at that time it was not obvious at all. Like, who is going to win out? And that was a competition. And technical things, technical in the sense of our hands, the old people said that, well, hey, I can't use the BlackBerry, it's just too small. And then interesting was this swiping technology, these flat screen. A lot of people resisted this, and they didn't like it. They wanted the plain, small keyboard that was better, that clicked instead of this flat screen. But the flat screen won out because the young people were using it. It was much more, it was much faster, and then market was not old people, this technology. And young people were completely able to use the flat surface and swiping and not doing everything on this small thing. But all these, like each time this new things came up, some software engineer makes a presentation, and then it's either, yeah, that can go, or that's good, right? So all these junctions make a difference in what kind of technologies get funded and developed in these huge corporations and teams of software engineers. I used to I used to be in this kind of thing because of I used to have a former partner who was an engineer at the junction. I mean, he was developing 3D printers in prototype. That was also the 90s, late 90s. The imagination was, well, hey, what if printers could make 3D objects? And that was very difficult, how to do that. The technology, the engineering and the programming was there. What was difficult was the temperature, yeah, of the material. The material and the temperature, how it becomes solid or not. I mean, sort of real tangible material conditions. And that had to be worked through. But the software and the codes that would make this three-dimensionality possible, it was way before, it was completed way before the actual materiality, like the temperature, what kind of stuff that you use. But nowadays, I mean, it became a standard thing, this 3D technology, right? But it took 25, 30 years from the point at which that became a conception that was sort of like thought out, right? So that these things become obvious and usable, but it has a history that is very interesting to study if you do philosophy of technology. the technology development. And because it's not just sort of retrospectively, right? But what's happening now, that's also very interesting, right? Especially in, like John said, yeah, social media, AI, how these bots work, yeah, these interface, and yeah, so but you just have to have a lot of time to read through these things, yeah, and then maybe it's just well, I'm just gonna die before everything will happen. We live and we die, right? So yeah, good. Yeah, and that is our world. Yeah, maybe I didn't translate this whole thing. I'm a bad translator, so if you can read Japanese, just read the Japanese. Anthropology must base its study on the everyday. あ、そう、now comes the 日常的なもの, the everydayness. As I said, reality must first of all be thought of through our dealings with others. That is, the everyday. This is not taken seriously in philosophy yet. That is exactly the area we must examine in anthropology. Our actual living is full of everyday actions, but clarifying such actual living is the task of anthropology. So everydayness, world historicality, and historicality, these three notions are the foundational frameworks of anthropology. So it's the ichijose, often thought of as the mundane, but it turns out it's not the mundane, because that's what we do, right? And like the 90% of the dealings that we do is in the everyday realm. And that's how new technologies gets invented all the time. Not just technologies, but designs, right? And also how that is culturally coded. These wash toilets that I love, that's everywhere in Japan, even in university toilets, these washlets. Yeah? In Germany, that can be only sold as a medical product. It's not an everyday object because people say, hey, why do we have to wash our butts? Right? So it's like you have to go through this extremely medical looking because I once thought of like I would like to have one for myself. It was like you need sort of almost like you need what do you call it, the doctor's assent to be able to buy this expensive medical equipment that has to be at home. So it has a different cultural meaning altogether, right? And also interesting in this sense is the role that robotics play in. So that's also a ethically interesting realm. Like in Japan, they made Aibo, the robot dog, and these robots, cute little robots. They deliver menus to people, and also the old people care robots, right? These are facilities. That's also in a German context. It's like freaking weird. Like, why would one of not? Because sort of the general anti-technological climate to think of a pet robot, that's it's just not thinkable. And also to be taken care of by a robot when you are old, that idea also doesn't appeal to people at all. But in Japan, it has under the other cultural discourse. I don't want to bother other people, so it's better to have a robot taking care of me. And also, it reduces embarrassment because robots don't care. But I just don't want to embarrass myself, right? So it's this kind of a thing makes the care robots possible in a Japanese context and welcome, right? The robot companions. Because of this cultural context, I don't want to bother other people. That's very strong. Whereas in Germany, they discuss, I would rather have a human being taken care of because it's from say, you don't think of it from the caretaker's perspective, but you think of it from your needs, let's just say, right? So this goes about care robots, this goes about sex robots, this goes about, that's just another Japanese specialty. This is sex robots. I'm just not going to get into it. But anyway, that's a very different cultural and contextual place of how the technology becomes out of the everyday, which I think are interesting to observe. The virtual, what can one virtually do? These kinds of things. But it's of course not in Miki's time, but I think it's you can use this kind of a reflection further on to think about these things. The problem of human historicality is centered to anthropology, but the foundation for such a consideration, as well as the goal, is everydayness. Again, back to everydayness, the importance of everydayness. From this perspective, in contrast to philosophy of history being the study of the historicality of the world, anthropology entails the philosophy of history from the everyday, from our concrete involvement on a daily basis. Everydayness, in some sense, is the foundation of history. The actions that might be recorded in history are supported by everyday life and the function on the basis of its foundation. Everydayness is the perpetual state of our lives. Habits. I think I petered out and translated this. But anyway, maybe I have to stop now because I think I no longer have a translation. But you get the basic idea. Habits are also the way of doing things that become, say, habitual, in this sense. And it's cultural, as I explained. I mean, I lived in 3 different habitual contexts, and they are different. And that's what makes these dealings interesting, right? But anyway, so that would have been on Miki's notion of the experiential, ontological everydayness. Thanks so much.